Hi guys, it is April from Getting Hookah With It. Today we're going through what I read in March. This is my March wrap up. Let's get into it. So I read 7 books in March and I think I had a pretty darn good reading month considering. Now, the beginning of the month was a lot better than the end of the month. Just in terms of how much I could read, I felt a little more positive at the beginning of the month, and then what everyone is going through, COVID-19 kind of happened and I got a little stressed out and I didn't read as much towards the end. But still, 7 books, not bad. I'm pretty impressed with myself. So we are going, as usual, from least favorite to most favorite. So we're starting with my 2 stars. The first 2-star book that I read was Let Me Lie by Claire Mackintosh. Now, I think I've read nearly everything by Claire Mackintosh, and I usually end up giving them around a 2-star, maybe 3 once in a while. There is something that pulls me towards her writing, though. You'd think that reading enough 2 stars by this author, I would just stop reading her, but I find her writing, the writing style itself is good, and I am pulled throughout the whole book. But there are just always plot holes or something that just ends up making me give it 2 stars. And Let Me Lie was no different. This is about a woman who's just given birth to a daughter. I think the daughter is like two or 3 months old, fresh little baby, and she's enjoying motherhood, but she is really sad that her parents aren't here to meet her baby. Her parents both committed suicide a year apart from one another, or so that is what the police have told her. She actually thinks that they were murdered. She thinks something is wrong with this picture. She just doesn't imagine. She knows her parents very well. She does not believe that they tried to committed suicide. And so she doesn't buy it and she starts to dive into this mystery. So I ended up giving this 2 stars for several reasons. First, I kind of guessed the twist at the end. There are several twists throughout this book, and one of them did surprise me, which I really liked, and I was like, this is gonna be great. And then as it went along, I was like, oh, I think this is gonna happen and that's gonna happen, and they did happen. So that's not good with a thriller. I like to be surprised, that's for sure. Also, I mean, the baby is kind of at the forefront of the book at the beginning. It's a very young baby, and if any of you have ever had kids, you know that first little bit, at least for me, is very all-consuming. You're not sleeping, and you are just trying to adjust to being a mom and figuring out what in the world they need, and also trying to adjust to your new identity and carving out some you time as well. And so when the mystery picks up and she starts delving into this mystery, I almost felt like this is not the time that would happen. I don't think that you would get entirely all consumed with something like that. Now, that's maybe me. But I just felt it was slightly unrealistic. Also, the baby kind of disappeared. Like, the baby is everything at the beginning, and then as it goes on, you're like, does she still have her baby? Because where'd the baby go? How is she keeping this child alive, basically? There's also something in here where she is hiding information from her husband about what is going on. She doesn't want him to worry. He's a psychiatrist. He was her psychiatrist after her parents died, and they ended up having a baby together. In any case, she's hiding stuff from him. And what I found extremely annoying about this is that it would be so easy to be caught up in the lie, like so unbelievably easy, to the point where I was like, how does he already not know that? So I really didn't appreciate that, and I thought it was actually quite a dumb thing on her part and also on the author's part, because it was such a huge plot hole to me that I had a really hard time getting past that. So yeah, overall, it was just a 2-star read for me. Will I read more Claire McIntosh? Most likely, because I like her writing and I do flip the pages. I listened to this on audio. And yeah, it was good audio. So in any case, 2-star for that one. Another 2-star read from me was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. And I'm sorry that I don't have these with me. I have passed them all along to my mom. We did a little drop off of some things for her to just, you know, get by in this time. Not that she is at a loss for books. She has plenty of books on her shelves, but I feel like these kinds of books are good to read at this time. So The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This is about a family that moves to Alaska in the 70s, I believe. We meet the father, who is a very abusive man, very controlling man. He is a Vietnam vet and is going through some major PTSD. He is an alcoholic. He has not handled his life well. We follow the mom, but mostly we're following their teenage daughter. I think she's like 12 or 13 when it starts. And then you follow her over the course of 4 or 5 years. I should say we follow her when she's around that age, and then it flashes forward 4 years. So we follow her as a very young teen, and then as she's getting older. And okay, so the atmosphere was wonderful. I could feel the cold. I loved them getting ready for their first winter, which is incredibly, incredibly dangerous in this area in Alaska. For me, the writing style itself didn't work, and I have struggled with this with Kristen Hanna before. I am someone who didn't really love The Nightingale all that much. It was fine, it was good, I flipped the pages, but I do struggle with her writing style. I find it slightly juvenile and a little too choppy for me. Yeah, I thought the plot was going to like help me through it, and then the plot had some issues that I struggled with in terms of characters and stuff as well. What I didn't understand was at the beginning of the book, our main character, is her name Lenny or Lexi? She's younger and she's making all sorts of decisions that make a lot of sense for how old she is, how she handles her dad, and her mom's relationship, their relationship, the move and stuff. I kind of felt like, okay, I think I'd be a little more angsty, but maybe I wouldn't if I was in a violent setting. So the choices that she made a lot of sense for that time. As it flashed forward like 4 or 5 years, the choices that she made went from being logical to being incredibly illogical, and to the point where there were like plot holes and character holes, because I was like, who are you? This doesn't make any sense. Why did you go from being someone who had made sense and sensible choices to being someone who like regressed almost? I really struggled with that. This obviously builds, you know that this tension in this household is going to build, and you know that something big is going to happen, and I really wanted it to happen a different way. It happened in a very strange way that to me didn't make sense and didn't really follow the characters and who they've been all of this time through the book. So it just ended up being a 2-star for me. I got really frustrated with the characters and the story as it went on, so it had to be 2 stars. For my 3-star, again, something that I don't have in physical form anymore because I passed it on to my mom, is Darling Rose Gold. This is based on a true story about a woman who was essentially grew up her whole life thinking she was incredibly ill. Her mom brought her to all sorts of doctors. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. It turns out that her mom was lying to her her entire childhood. She was never ill. And her mom does go to jail for this crime that she committed against her own child, which I cannot imagine doing, but she did. I didn't know the storyline at all of this. Apparently it's been made into like a mini series and a documentary, and I don't know where I've been living, under a rock or something, but I didn't know about this. And I think if I had known about it, I probably would have given this a less of a star, because I was surprised going along about the nature of the mother, the nature of Rose Gold. I did really enjoy the writing style. I thought the character development was really good. I will definitely be reading more by this author, so I really enjoyed those two things. I did find the plot slow. This is a domestic thriller, and as you all know, I like my thrillers to be very gritty, and there just wasn't enough going on in the plot, and the nature of the plot wasn't dark enough for me. I wanted more. I did find it slow, but I did end up loving the ending. The ending surprised me. I didn't see it coming, and I thought it was a lot of fun and twisted and just great. And I really did enjoy Rose Gold. At the beginning, I really was just feeling for her. Oh my gosh, she's a victim. And then as you get to know her, you're like, ooh, I think you have a little bit of not sass, a twisted nature in her as well, I thought. I did, at least. Maybe I'm alone in that. But I did enjoy it, but it just still ended up being 3 stars because it was so slow. And I did want it to be grittier. Okay, now we're moving on to my 4-star reads, and I have 2 for you. Both of them are historical fiction. So the first that I'm going to share with you, and I have them here, is Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce. I was sent this by Simon & Schuster Canada, I believe, and I was pleasantly surprised by this book. So surprised. This sounds like a very fluffy story. So this follows a woman who really wants to be a journalist. The war is going on. This happens during World War II. And she is hired by a newspaper, and she's like, right, I'm going to get in this. I'm going to help so many people get the word out about what's going on in the war. And it turns out she's going to be helping with a ladies' column. She's going to be helping Dear Mrs. Bird write her column, which is basically people send in all sorts of questions, and Mrs. Bird decides which one she's going to respond to and which one she's going to discard, and she writes an answer to them. So she's very upset that this is what she's actually going to be doing during the war, but she's like, well, you know, I'm still a journalist, kind of. But she's disappointed in Mrs. Bird because Mrs. Bird is very selective, shall we say, with the questions that she answers. She doesn't want anything that's risque, anything about dating, no. You know, real questions that women send in, she will not answer to. And so our main character is like, well, I'm going to help them out. So she starts writing them back as Mrs. Bird, and she even starts like publishing some of her answers because Mrs. Bird doesn't read the paper that she writes in any case. So I thought this was going to be incredibly fluffy like that throughout it. It becomes very dark as it goes on. This does follow people in London during the Blitz. Our main character helps out with recovering people, recovering bodies during the Blitz. So that surprised me in a good way. It had a really good mix. I thought the characters in here were incredibly well developed. I really was rooting for all of them, especially our main character. Oh my goodness. Now there is romance in here, and I also didn't mind that. It is not the like central focus of the book, which I like, especially during war stories. I don't like romance to be the central focus. And I enjoyed the romances in this book. It was wonderful, like one of my favorite World War II stories now. So great. So, Dear Mrs. Bird, 100% a 4-star read from me. Another 4-star read from me was The Lost Orphan. This is coming out on April 7th. And oh my goodness, guys, go and pick this up. This is gothic and a historical fiction. We follow two people in London in 1754. We follow Bess, who gives up her baby. She is lower class. She can't take care of her baby the way that she wants to. And so she brings the baby to this home. It's called the Foundling Hospital, where you can bring your baby. You leave an item of yourself. A lot of women gave items of clothing to the child as a marker almost, that this is my child and I'm giving them this to remember me by. And you have the opportunity to go back and pick up your baby again. It's not like an adoption kind of situation. This is, I'm struggling right now. I will be back for my child, although many people didn't go back for their children. In Bess's case, she does go back. She has been saving up money this whole time. And I think she goes back 6 or 7 years later. The baby has already been claimed by someone who says that they are her. And so we follow her trying to sort out what in the world happened to my child. And then we also follow a woman who is upper class, lives in a townhome, and is kind of a recluse. It's phenomenal. I really loved this. I loved the writing style. Now, I read this, I should say, when we found out everything was going down. So I was racing through it, and then things got more and more serious in our world, and I started to slow down. I think this could have been a 5-star read for me if the circumstances hadn't been what they were. But it ended up being 4 stars. I will say it did also remind me a lot of The Light Between Oceans, which was a pleasant surprise. This follows these two characters who are trying to do the right thing. They're not always succeeding at doing the right thing, and their choices can be hurtful to others, but you understand them. There's a lot of gray in here, which I really liked. But yeah, it did feel slow sometimes, but probably just because of the circumstances that I am in and that we are all in, unfortunately. But all that to be said, I loved this book, and I really think if you like a gothic read, historical read, if you liked The Light Between Oceans, I think you would like this. So that's The Lost Orphan. I think this is called The Foundling in the UK. So anyway, loved it, loved it, loved it. And now it's time for my 5-star reads. They're both middle grade. I'm going to start with Sweep by Jonathan Auxier. This is the story of a girl and her monster. This follows Nan Sparrow. She is a chimney sweep in Victorian London, and it's a very, very dangerous job, and a job that was given to children who were small enough, basically, to squeeze into chimneys and clean them. Very, very dangerous. One day, Nan gets stuck in a chimney, and many children died being stuck in chimneys and not being able to get out. And she gets stuck, but she finds herself basically in the next second being saved by a monster. And it's about her relationship with this monster. It flashes backwards in time to when Nan was a baby, a little kid being taken care of by another chimney sweep. And it's just, I loved this book so much. The characters were so rich. The setting was rich. It was both sad and uplifting. It's about found family and real family. And oh my goodness, I adored this book. This is a library copy. I will definitely be buying a copy myself for Nora to read later on, because I want her to read this book because it was so good. Okay. The other middle grade that I gave 5 stars is The War That Saved My Life. I actually read this in library format, and then I bought my own copy because I loved it so much. This is about a little girl named Ada. It is World War II, and her mother and her brother all live in London, I think it's London. Her mother is unbelievably abusive and cruel. Ada has a clubfoot, and she's spent her entire life indoors because her mother is embarrassed by her. So she hasn't gone to school, she hasn't left the house, she doesn't have friends because of a clubfoot and her mother's inability to look at her child as a human being with human needs. Oh my gosh, her mom, as you can tell, made me so angry. So during this time, London was very much at risk of being bombed, and it was bombed. A lot of people sent their children to homes in the countryside to try to save their lives, essentially. And Ada and her brother are sent to the countryside, and they stay with this woman who didn't really want children to come into her home. She is very much in grief. She lost the woman that she was living with. I also think, I could be wrong and it is not explored in here, but I think this woman is a lesbian, and I really wanted that to be explored, but there's little hints of that in here, which I loved. So she's really grieving the loss of her partner, I believe, and these kids come into her life, and it is again about found family. Now this, I will say, reads a little younger than Sweep. Sweep has bigger words. I just think the language style is slightly different. So I could see myself reading this to Nora when she's a little bit younger, which is really, really great. I thought this was incredibly wholesome, and you are rooting for Ada and her brother, but you're really rooting for Ada this whole time. And you just fall in love with these kids and this woman that takes them in, and I adored it so much. So yeah, that is The War That Saved My Life. There's also a sequel to it, which I also bought because how could I not? So those are all of the books that I read in March. I will tell you really, really quickly what I'm reading right now. I'm not going to go into it too much. I'm reading As Bright as Heaven right now by Susan Meissner. This is about the Spanish flu. So this is very much not something that I would recommend to tons of people right now, because it does feel like it could be incredibly triggering for a lot of people. I'm liking it, but I'm a weird person. When something is going on in my life that's negative, I like to read about those things to feel not so alone, and sometimes to find little glimpses of hope. So I don't know. I'm a bit weird that way, but I'm really liking this book a lot. So much so that I think I want to read a lot more by Susan Meissner. This is my first of hers. I think I had picked up Secrets of a Charmed Life and put it down for some reason. But yes, this takes place in Philadelphia during the Spanish flu. We follow a family who moved there to help an uncle with his business. He is the director, I should say, of a funeral home. And they moved there to help him out. And, then the Spanish flu comes in, and they find a little baby boy who's orphaned, and they take him in. They are also at the beginning of this grieving the death of their infant son, an infant brother. So I'm loving this book so much, but again, I wouldn't really recommend it to tons of people right now. But after this is all over, that may be something that you'd want to read. And then I'm also listening to In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. Now, I know that I think I have like 2 more days to have it, and then it has to go back, so I might have to pick it up in book form instead, but I'm liking it so far. I almost wonder if I should be reading it in book form anyway. So those are the 2 that I'm reading at the moment. But yeah, I hope that you guys are doing well. Let me know in the comments below what you read in March. What was the best thing you read in March? We need a little positivity right now. What was the best thing that you read in March? I would love to know. I hope that you guys are staying well. Again, in the description box below, I'm getting much better at putting things in there. You can find the books that I mentioned here. You can also find my Amazon wish list there, my Goodreads page, my Instagram page. So go and check me out in those other places. Hope you're doing well. Stay safe, and I will talk with you soon. Bye, guys.